Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. Welcome to Integrated Business Logic into Cloud Infrastructure. My name is Elanit, and I'm Head of Marketing at Wiv. Thank you for joining our webinar today that we're host together with Cyera and AWS. Before we start, a few housekeeping rules. So we strive to make this a very learning and great environment for everyone. So feel free to ask any question you have and drop it in the Q&A chat throughout this webinar. We'll, of course, answer, our speakers will answer it with their session, and we'll leave some time at the end. But we do ask everyone to please be mindful and keep this environment peaceful and great for everyone's knowledge. So let me just present our speakers today. So we have Dror Levin from Cyera, who will start us off. And then Dvir Mizrahi, our VP FinOps from Wiv.ai. And of course, Yuri, I really need to learn how to pronounce your last name. I'm so sorry. From AWS, who will wrap things for us. We may do some shifting around throughout this webinar, hopefully not, and the schedule will allow us to go as planned. So without any further ado, I'm passing over the mic to Dror. Dror, the stage is yours.
Hey guys, so let me share my screen on it, or I'm sending a request. Hopefully you'll see my screen in a minute. Okay, I think I'm sharing. Well, hopefully you can see the presentation. Yes, you can. All right, guys. So hi, Dror Levin from Cyera. The overall theme for this webinar is integrating business logic into cloud infrastructure, and I'm going to talk about how we in Cyera do waste cleanup the business-oriented way. So let's start. We'll have brief introductions, then the problem statement, how we solve it, what tools we use and recommend, and next steps for us, and then questions and all of that. Let's start with the introduction. So this is me. I have lot of experience. Let's put it at 20 plus. I've been doing FinOps over the last few years, DevOps before that, and things that should have been considered DevOps when that term wasn't even out there. I have a wife, 4 kids, a dog, 3 cats, and numerous frogs in my backyard. And I work for Cyera, which is a great company to work for. We're growing quickly, we're growing significantly, we're tripling our valuation and number of employees and all of that. A really, really great company. But here's the thing that you need to remember because nobody listens at this point, but this is important. We scan customers' data. We are a cyber company and we try to find issues with our customers' data, and that affects the way that we have the resources that we have in our cloud environment. I'll explain this in a bit. So basically, we try to look at customers' data, but we try not to interfere neither with performance nor with cost. So in many, many cases, we will take a snapshot of the customer's data and then move it to our cloud environment and scan it locally, not causing any load, not causing any additional cost to the customer. And that means that we have a lot of resources that we use temporarily in our environment. So when I first entered Cyera, I was a superstar. On my first week on the job, I managed to find lots and lots of RDS snapshots, and I removed them, and I saved about 50,000 US dollars a month on our cloud bill, and that was terrific. I did great. Everybody was happy. But that was just the start of it. Um, we have many snapshots, both from databases and instances, because of what I told you earlier, and because everyone takes backups and rarely cares about removing those later. We have lots of disks, some are detached, we have lots of instances, we have lots of DBs and more and more and more, many kinds of resources and lots of waste. All of that across 4 clouds. We work across AWS, Azure, GCP, and recently also OCI. And we have thousands of accounts. And all of that with different business requirements. So the topic here is different business requirements and how to adjust for that. We have different ones I'll explain a bit later. So I'm looking at a database and wondering, is this waste? Can a database that is being run, that is being accessed, might that be waste? Well, if it's a production DB in our production environment called prod something, probably not. If it's in some playground environment, maybe, probably. If it's a 3 months old database that no one has connected to over the last 3 weeks, probably waste. But what if it's a database in our production environment that was only accessed a couple of days ago? Could that be waste? Well, it could be, but it's very hard to tell. And again, the way we do things over here is that we actually download a snapshot and then we provision a database and we scan it, and then it should be cleaned up. It usually is cleaned up, but not always. And I'm trying to find ways to figure that out, to check if that's the case. And of course, if it's waste, remove it as soon as possible. So we have multiple business rules, and here are a few examples of them. We have our tags. So if the environment says production, do not delete. Again, not always. We have naming conventions, so ideally I should be able to look at the name of the resource and identify what it's being used for. For instance, if the name starts with dev, probably development. We're supposed to have retention. We're supposed to have tags, owner, and some other tags. And in some cases, we want to have a human in the loop. So some resource can be deleted automatically. In some other cases, we want to ask the owner, can we remove that? Are you still using this or not? Let's say that we have a development-related resource that was created a couple of days ago in RDS snapshot. Maybe it can be deleted, maybe not. Let's ask the user. So how do we solve this? Well, we need to remove waste across different clouds, and those are spread across thousands of accounts, projects, and subscriptions, and I do mean thousands. And we need to do that across multiple resource types, and we have all those different business requirements that we need to adhere to. So let's take this at a phase approach. First of all, we need to have a tagging strategy. And our tagging strategy says, among other things, every resource should be tagged with an owner and an owning team, and it should have an expiration date. The expiration date can say never, but ideally there will be an actual expiration date at which you can remove this resource. So if you have an object and it has expired, then great. That's easy. Let's just delete it. Every expired resource should be deleted. Perfectly fine. That should be easy, unless there is no expiration tag. And if there is no expiration tag, what do we do now? I can intervene manually. I'd rather not. Thousands of accounts, too many resources to handle manually. So we're trying to set up a mechanism that adds expiration tags. It might be based on business rules. If this is a development account and more than a week has passed, we can probably create an expiration tag. Let's give them another week, another 3 days. That should be good enough. In other cases, we actually need to ask the owner for the expiration. And if we have an owner tag, that should be easy. We can Slack them, create a Jira, whatever we need. Again, I'd like to not intervene, not do anything manually, let the system take care of this. And ideally, that should happen and work fine unless there is no owner tag as well. And if there is no owner tag, what can we do then? So ideally, we can set up something, some automation that will identify owners and then assign the proper owner tags. If there is a naming convention to resources and the naming convention contains first name and last name, that's not as easy as it sounds, but it is relatively easier. In some cases, it's even more complex. But we want to use automation. We want to use tools to do all of that, identify the owner, then ask them for an expiration. And once the resource has expired, actually remove the resource. And of course, we need to take into account those business rules that we mentioned earlier. Which environment are they running? What naming conventions are they using? What's the retention period for this specific environment? Who's the owner? And should a human actually approve removal, or can we just do it automatically without asking anyone? Okay, so we have all of that. What are we actually doing? Which tools are we actually using to achieve all that? So as mentioned earlier, we have multiple requirements, but let's talk about technical requirements. We need some workflow and we need it to be automatic. So workflow automation is a must. We need to have some sort of remediation. Again, I don't want to step in manually. I don't want some tool to tell me, hey, you can delete this resource and that resource too, and that other one as well. I want some automatic remediation to take place. Ideally, no code. Ideally, some tool that would allow me to quickly and easily create new workflows. But then in some cases, I would have to intervene manually and allow some customization. For instance, because we copy all those resources from our customer accounts, the actual creation date might be the original creation date, and then we would add a tag with our own creation date tag. So in some cases, I would look at the actual creation date, and in other cases, I would create some complex logic that would allow me to extract the date out of the tag. We need to have some observability, which workflows are running correctly, which have failed, where are the issues, which issues did I get? We need to have multiple platform support. Again, working across 4 clouds, we need all of them to be supported. We need integration with third parties. I want to be able to Slack the user. I want to be able to create Jiras. I want to be able to interact with our users using their own tools, not some new third-party tool that I've just introduced and I wish for someone to log into my tool and use that. It would be great if I could have some ready-made templates looking for I don't know, databases with no active connection, data templates for removing detached EBS volumes, etc. It would be also great if this could be FinOps oriented. I mean, I could create all of that with any workflow tool, but that would require a lot of work. If it's already targeted for FinOps, that would help me significantly. And last but not least, having support would be really nice. Having someone to talk to, hey, I tried to do this, it doesn't work. How do I fix this? Let's work together and make this workflow a success. That would be great. There are several tools out there. Wiv is our tool of choice and our host for this webinar. I'm extremely satisfied with Wiv. It supports all of my requirements. I work with it and I highly recommend it. There are other tools out there. There is OpenOps, which is an open source tool that should do this, obviously without the support, but without some of these other features as well. And there are other tools, not many, at least not any that I've found. I think those are the leading tools out there. And again, you know what I recommend. What do we want to do next? So obviously nothing is perfect and our work is never really done. What I would like to do next in our own configuration is add more resource types, support more resource types, removal of waste of different types, and maybe we'll have new cloud providers. I would like to be able to remove those as well. We work with Snowflake, we work with ClickHouse. I would love to have ways to remove waste from those areas as well. I still need to intervene a lot. There is a lot of manual work around this, trying to figure out who owns this resource or that one. I would like to find clever automatic ways to decrease human intervention. Again, integrate more systems and processes into this. We are trying to reuse our code. For instance, the code that identifies the resource owner. I would like to increase code reuse. I would like to further enhance our observability, creating additional alerts, reports, and all sorts of stuff. We have great plans for this. Overall, I believe that we can save 5 to 10% of our cloud cost using um, I believe that 5 to 10% of our cost is waste and that we can remove that, but that can only happen if this happens automatically. Doing it manually is just not scalable. With this, I'm done. If anyone has any questions, I'd love to answer them. I don't see the chat right now, so if there are any questions there, I would like it if anyone can read them out loud. And if no, not, then let's move forward to Dvir. So thank you guys. Dvir, take it from here.
Thank you, Dror.
Bye,
We
guys.
don't have any questions right now. Oh, we just have one question popped out from Roy. Isn't there a way to mediate cloud users to commit, publish, deploy their work through a pipeline that checks for rules? Only workloads that are deployed with all three tags you mentioned, for example.
So earlier when I mentioned the tagging policy, then there was a sentence there about a tagging framework. So ideally, we would have enforcement, and people would be forced to comply with these restrictions. We're moving in that direction, but in my experience, this is never perfect. There will always be a DevOps with admin rights who will just have to create this one single backup and then will forget all about it. And that single backup will not have all these different tags associated with it. Nothing is foolproof, but yes, we want to move there. We're using GitHub Actions. We want to make sure that everyone complies, and even when we get there will still be exceptions.
Thank you, Dror. Roy, I hope that answers your question. You, of course, are more than welcome to continue sending more. And Roy is still here until the end of the webinar, so he will be able to answer more questions if you guys think of any. And now the mic is yours, Dvir.
Awesome. Just one thing from my side, Ray. While you can enforce like the keys of tags, it's very hard based on regex to enforce the values. So you don't want to complicate your logic too much if you want to apply very advanced regex on values that you allow on the value per tag. So it creates a bit more complication on that front. And on that note, let me share my presentation. Let me see when you see it.
We can see it.
Awesome. Okay, so today we're going to talk about integration business logic into cloud infrastructure. And first of all, let me say thank you to Dror for the amazing presentation. Just one thing, when you said there is no owner on the resource and you put like a lost puppy image, it broke my heart. So for next time. Awesome. Let's do a practical FinOps deep dive. First of all, a quick introduction to who I am. More than 10 years in FinOps. Started my journey in 2017. I was the head of financial engineering at Wix. Today, I'm VP of FinOps at Wiv.ai. It's a tailor-made automation platform for FinOps. I'm going to show you a bit examples of what I'm going to talk about, and the representation of a workflow or automation and how we work to achieve goals like what Dror discussed earlier, and much more. And I'm going to talk about a project, an internal project that we did with Wiv on allocating the business logic on top of our infrastructure. Let's begin. The agenda for my session would be why allocating business context to your workload matters, because we first need to understand like the scope of the problem that we are facing as FinOps practitioners. What can we do with automation, and where we can solve that challenge in our organization? What's next once we have the automation and what we could do? I'm going to share a bit more examples, and I hope you'll have questions. Feel comfortable. There are no bad questions, right? So feel comfortable asking however you want. Awesome. I'm not going to deep dive directly into the allocation approaches because, as far as I understand, Yuri is going to talk about it later in his session. But just as a concept, because I do need the scope of how to attach business logic to your infrastructure, there are three main disciplines. So the first one, the highest level, is the ability to apply ownership based on account. That means that you have a specific account, a specific ID, and it's attached to a specific owner or a group or a team that's in charge of everything in that account. So you don't have to have a granularity per resource. You just know that under this specific account, this is the owner. If you need additional granularity for shared tenant accounts, for example, multiple agendas running on one single account, then AWS or any other cloud provider gives you the ability to put your own user-defined labels or tags on top of resources so you can identify them based on what you need. Now, this is just a very basic, simple FinOps practice, and I think it's the baseline for everything that we're going to discuss today. So there are some limitations on tagging. You can put up to 50 per resource, and it has a bit more limitations. But the idea is very simple. We can color different agendas in our infrastructure in order to assign specific owners. And the last one, which I'm going to talk today with you about, it's the shared tenancy. So what happens if, for example, I have one Kubernetes cluster to host all my team's containers? What happens when I'm running a serverless architecture and the Lambda function that I'm running is the same Lambda function for every tenant in my organization? So this will require an additional custom allocation. That you can generate either directly from AWS by using split cost allocation, but you can also develop your own methodology based on what you're running. And I think, again, and this is why I put it there, this is where the magic happens. Like this is a very mature advanced FinOps. The ability to put the data that you have on a shared tenancy workload. So unfortunately, when we're talking about tagging or when talking about the ability to color different agendas inside your cloud infrastructure, it's mostly used as a visibility for showback or chargeback. That means that if you're talking about tagging strategy, that means that you want to show how much cost that team generated. So this is John cost, this is Eric cost, this is this team cost. And while it's a noble cause, right? And it is important to be able to show back the charges for your tenants. Is it the only use for this? I mean, is this the only use case that we'll use tags for? Or should it also be used to track not just ownership, but as Dror talked about, a set of rules or a set of directives on our infrastructure to understand what we need to do and how we need to do that. And let's focus on the State of FinOps 2026. It was just released, and I love the sentence there by the FinOps Foundation that says central teams can't scale through headcount alone, so they scale through enablement, automation, and embedded champions. And for enterprise and large enterprises, you can see the increase of priority for enabling automation and defining unit economics. And in general, that means that in order for us to achieve a successful FinOps practice, we'll have to enable automation at scale, and we have to define what is the business that we're executing on our platform in order to understand if we're doing better or worse. And I think one of the trickiest questions for a FinOps practitioner is your cost increased last month by 10%. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Now, as FinOps, the initial response we want to say, it's a bad thing, right? Because cost increased by 10%. But what if your business increased by 60%? So this is a good increase. Like I want to pay more in order to generate more value on the cloud. So the idea of enabling automations and unit economics is to understand if the money that we invest in cloud infrastructure has a positive return of investment. I did a quick example of what I'm trying to achieve by allocating business context. Let's say we have two environments. We have the prod environment and we have the dev environment, and everything is tagged. We know how much things cost. But let's say, for example, Alice machine has a recommendation. Like we tracked metrics, we track relevant information on that specific resource, and we found out that it's idle, it needs right sizing, or God forbid, it stopped for the last or more than 30 days. And the EBS that it attached to it doesn't generate any business value for us. So what do we do now? Like we already have the business metadata. So what we can do is generate an automated process, again, based on our understanding of who is in charge of that resource. And exactly like what Dror talked about earlier in the session, generate a workflow. And this is an example of how you can do that at scale. So you don't necessarily have to go instance by instance. Give me all dev instances that has low CPU utilization, group them by owner, and for each owner, what we want to do is to distribute this information. And sorry, not just to distribute it, but the ability to make it an asynchronous workflow automation that based on the response of the relevant persona, the relevant owner of that resource, you'll be able to understand what exactly we need to do, right? So you don't have to scale your headcount. All you have to do is scale your practices. And when everyone talking about a centralized FinOps practice and distributed, the centralized FinOps team and distributed practice, this is how it looks in mature companies. And you have the ability to continue the automation by automatically remediate the specific inefficiency, or you can add it to the sprint, but either way, it doesn't get lost in the process. And just as an example, we talked about a Slack integration that you can simplify the way to distribute your recommendations into the teams, into your business, and to give all that relevant context. So the engineer at the end will understand what should I do with that inefficiency, or how can I just launch and forget because I'm no longer needing this. Let's say we have another example, another environment called testing, and the FinOps created a test cost analyzer instance that they wanted to test something. But it also knows that it has TTL, which means time to live, and it set an expiration as a tag. And now we're entering a world where tagging is not just a business metadata on resources, but also give us the ability to create actions. As again, Dror said, the expiration tag, the time to live, the purpose, and give more context about the set of rules that is applied to that specific resource and the type of automation that you want to add based on the environment or based on the specific resource requirements. And it can also be generated as an orchestration. That means that you can take those tags and not just as a binary automation, just delete or remove or terminate. You can also create automations that kind of orchestrating the things that are not relevant for infra as code, for example, because, for example, RDS, if you stop it, it keeps starting every week. So you can generate a process to make sure that it will never happen for stopped RDS instances, just as an example. And the tagging or the ability to add your business context will give you the ability to only isolate environments, not just to show their costs, but isolate environments for action. Like this is the part in my infrastructure where I want to enable automation on top of. So the allocation of business context give you the foundation for action. It's not just cost visibility. And I think the most important part here is the ability to scale your practice and remediate your recommendations, because most often the problem that most organizations have, and we saw that based on the priority in the FinOps Foundation, is not the ability to track or understand where our inefficiencies. I mean, it's important to understand or use tools that gives you recommendations, even though AWS, for example, give you the best recommendations on top of multiple services, you still have the ability to understand like what am I going to do with those recommendations. So tagging or adding your business context, it allows you to create that context. It's not, as I said, just to create automation to remove inefficiencies. You can schedule auto-scaling groups, capacity for dev environments during the weekends. You can delete orphaned resources, set expirations, time to leave, governance policies at scale. There are a lot of things that you can do using tagging strategies or applying set of rules or tag-based rules on your infrastructure. So those are a couple of examples that you can review. But wait, there is more. Let's talk about what we discussed earlier. So how we can allocate business context gives us the ability to track performance over time. That means in the world of unit economics, the ability for us to understand if we're doing better or worse, this is the way to allocate the different costs. And it makes it possible to identify where we are more or less efficient, not based on how much things are costing me, but based on how my business behave on top of the infrastructure. And for that, there is a shared allocation. And I want to show you how we did it at Wiv. So a workflow in Wiv, as you saw earlier, the ability, for example, to send human in the loop automation and remove idle or inefficiencies in the cloud. A workflow is a set of steps, and each steps trigger a service, okay, based on step function. And this is an example. So if you review that architecture in the cloud, you'll see like triggering to Lambda, ECS, etc. So a lot of services there. What if we could take the execution and based on the services that are running, we have the ability to gather the relevant information and create a billing schema from that. And to that end, in order to add our business context on that layer, we aggregate all the information from the execution ID to a workflow to the specific customer or tenant that is executing the different workflows. So while we have the metadata in place, I'm not going to read everything, don't worry. Once we have the metadata or the business context in place, the collection method is the ability to understand what happened during an execution and to apply the relevant cost metrics in order to understand not just how much my customer are costing me or how much a workflow is costing me, but to understand the behavior per execution, which is insane. And I'm going to show an example in a second what we did with this information. This is a quick architecture. So the second workflow ends in real time, it sends an event that is generating all the relevant data based on the execution that we had. And it sent it to a centralized place. And from this place, we're understanding or we created multiple processes like anomaly detection, unit economics, and the ability to integrate that with any new customer, any new tenant that we add to the platform. And the cost calculation formulas are here. For step function, it's based on state transition. The lambda is gigabyte per second multiplied by the number of invocations. And the Fargate vCPU per hour and memory hours based on the relevant configuration. And this is what we got. And currently we're looking at our own internal Wiv, but if you can see the drop down on the top, this is Grafana. you'll be able to see that we have any customer information there. And we can see a lot of information like in high level, how much thing costs per day and what are my key cost distributions per workflow, per customer tenant. But we also have the ability to track unit of economics. That means what is my cost per execution per tenant, or what is my cost per execution per workflow or automated process? Like where are my costs diverging, or which workflow I just edited and it created a very impactful impactful impact on my cost bottom line. And I think the idea is that once you can track changes in cost, it's simple enough, right? My lambda or my total cost per my production workload just increased. But it's not just enough. What we want to do is to drill down based on the business context. So to understand which service increased. And for in this example, we had a spike in our lambda because we increased the memory for testing, and it took us a while to reduce it back. But our KPI changed, and it's really cool to understand or to drill down to see what impacted in the tenant and based on the workflow that we executed or based on the specific process that was running on that specific tenant. So it's not just the ability to understand what my cost is, it's the ability to add the business context and what did I run on that environment from the business side that impacted my bottom line. And the coolest success story is one of the workflows. It's an inefficiency that we scanned. It's identifying CloudTrail optimization that creates recommendation for CloudTrail. And we saw this was one of our most expensive workflows in the platform. And we were able to pinpoint that specifically to a specific customer and to understand why this workflow specifically was so expensive. And we cut 80% of the execution of the workflow because we edited based on this knowledge. So it's not just to see, oh, my Lambda just increased by 200%. This is the relevant tenant and workflow that caused this specific spike. And it also, we were able to build automation process to track the actual cost versus the tracked cost. So if you can see the graphs, they're pretty much aligned. But on the 28th, we had an incident from our collection process. So we immediately knew that something was wrong, and then we were able to rectify it or remediate that. So it's a governance on top of an automated process to allocate business context to our environment. And we talked about anomaly detection. So every day we receive any changes, not just by cost, but which tenants actually caused us an increase in cost or any changes that they have in the platform, maybe a new workflow that they've built that is inefficient, and we can come inside and tell them, okay, this is something that you can remediate. So just the key takeaways, and I'm going to end. The first thing, the challenge is understanding our, not cost, but our business on top of the infrastructure. We have the tools out of the box, either if it's a single tenant based on account or based on tagging. Shared tenant allocation, it's again where the magic happens and where you can really pinpoint the relevant data and what's next, what you can do with it. And a unified FinOps and engineering strategy, because everyone has to have a seat at the table. FinOps is, you won't be able to move the needle if you're just trying to move it from the financial side and show people how much things cost. You can only do that based on engineering, not just goodwill, but data-based optimization efforts, and the ability to govern that by a centralized team of FinOps that generates the relevant unit economics. Any questions?
Thank you, Dvir.
Of course.
And of course, if you have any questions for Dvir or Dror, feel free to send them in a Q&A, and they're still here. And I will now turn the mic to Yuri.
Yuri,
Thank you.
go ahead.
Thanks, Dvir, and thank you, Dror. It was just amazing presentation from your side. Let me share my screen and let me know when you see it, because
We can see it.
you can see it. Amazing. So what I'm going to talk about is what happened beyond cost saving? Yeah, and Dvir mentioned importance of unit economics, importance of getting into unit economics. And I'm going to talk a bit more about this because unit economics is extremely important in a way that once you start optimizing your workloads, you want to actually measure the business impact because, first, second, third optimization success story is nice. We saved like 50K per month, we saved 100K per month. But then what if you start to shift left? What if unoptimized workloads even don't get deployed in the cloud? How you measure your impact of your actions, of your operations? And unit economics is a very nice answer here. Unit economics is also mentioned from many, many different sources. For example, it's one of the capabilities in FinOps framework from FinOps Foundation. So it's actually called unit economics. And I really would like to encourage everyone to go and read about it more because there are a lot of nice information and details about the importance of it. Then it's also one of the best practices in AWS well-architected framework for cost optimization pillar. It talks about the importance of tracking cost per business drivers. And in the laws of frugal architect from our CTO, Werner Vogels, there is a law which says systems that last align cost to business, which actually speaks about unit economics. And why it's all important? Because if you run all workloads on AWS to serve your customers, right? And more customers you have, more resources, more servers, more workloads you need to actually serve them, right? So your cost is dynamic. It's operational metric in the cloud, right? So it always will be following your usage patterns. The thing is that when you start optimizing, the cost might go down a little bit, but in most of the cases, it still could be growing. So tracking your impact of your optimizations, if you just track the cost itself, it's very, very hard. It's very hard to say whether the cost is just healthy because your business grows or the cost is unhealthy because someone started to run inefficient queries or started some 48x large instance without any purpose. So that's why it's important to look at the cost not just itself, but in projection to the business drivers or business value which is generated, which is exactly what FinOps is about, right? So the part of definition of the FinOps is not to spend less, but to maximize your business value from your workloads. So the difference, if you start measuring also the business drivers or like your, for example, amount of customers, amount of transactions, the difference of this between cost of business driver will be the value which you are actually getting. And unit cost is the cost divided by your business driver. It's cost per transaction, cost per customer. And if you start measuring the unit cost, first of all, you see the trend, even with the growing cost. If your business grow faster, your unit cost will go down. And it will be a good indication and good story to actually share with your leadership that we not just saved 50,000 per month, but we actually reduced cost per transaction, for example, by 25%. So we're contributing to our organizational margins. That immediately elevates your narrative to the leadership. It allows you to get more leadership champions, and the language is way easier to understand for financial teams, for executives, what you're doing here. Yeah, and it will also allow you to track your optimization efforts, even if you're working on things like shift left or things like automation, right? Is measuring cost per business driver is the only way to track your cost efficiency? No. There are several layers where you can track your cost efficiency, but it's very, very important to start doing this. First one is like lowest layer, which I call cost efficiency KPIs. It's basically where you take all different optimization opportunities and you turn them into the metrics. For example, you can measure how well you're adopting Graviton-based instances, how well you're covering your workloads with savings plans, or for example, what's percentage of your GP3 volumes out of total EBS volumes. So you basically track how well you're leveraging particular optimization opportunities, or for example, what amount of EBS snapshots which are older than 1 year over the entire EBS snapshots amount. So it's actually allows you to track how well you're leveraging of each of those optimization opportunities. And even if you have new workloads coming in, if your percentage of GP3 volume adoption, for example, for storage stays on the same level or goes down, it means that you're deploying already optimized workloads. So it provides you additional context of whether you getting into the cloud already optimized or you bring in something which would require optimization afterwards. And those metrics are pretty good also for engineering teams because they're self-explainable. Yeah, so if we track GP3 adoption, we need to use more GP3 volumes, right? So it's easy to understand, but it's a lot of metrics and it's hard to understand for leadership, right? So if you want to measure impact of your optimizations on this lower level to your infrastructure, that's where you can measure infrastructure unit cost. And that would be something like measuring average cost of normalized instance hour for compute or for databases, or for EBS, it could be measuring average cost per gigabyte of storage, or for S3, the same average cost of gigabyte for storage. For generative AI workloads with Bedrock, it could be something like measuring average cost of 1,000 tokens, right? So you actually can see that because we migrated to Graviton or because we adopted GP3 volumes, we managed to reduce our cost of infrastructure by, let's say, 15-20%, right? So actually all these first level metrics or lower level KPIs actually impact to a higher level KPIs. And vice versa, if you see increase of the average cost per gigabyte, that's a clear indication that you need to have a look into lower level metrics. What exactly drives this increase, right? What exactly drives this spike? And then the last layer, it's where you connect this all to business, where you're actually measuring the business impact of lowering. Oh, sorry, let me turn on the light here. Second. Yeah, sorry for that. Where you're measuring the impact of your optimization into your business. And that's what we are going to talk about now. When we get into unit cost economy, there are a few things which you need to kind of plan for. First is choosing the right unit cost metrics, right? What would be the metric to start from? And in this area, I split metrics into two main buckets. First is like easy mode, right? When you have some metric which covers your entire cloud spend. For example, it could be some unified organizational metric for which you don't even need to have something like cost allocation. So literally you can, start tracking it. Like the entry point is very, very easy. And it would allow you to get into unit cost economy like relatively easily. And the example of such metric could be something like measuring your cost per revenue, right? I hope that every company knows their revenue in some extent. So if you track something like infrastructure cost per $1,000 of revenue, that would be your example of unified organizational metric. So you have total cloud cost divided by your total metric, which is revenue. You may have more organizational revenues. The bottom line is that it's very simple entry point. And the next, if you want to dive deeper, if you want to actually understand if, for example, our cost per $1,000 revenue increased, which application, which environment, or which type of workloads drives it, that's where you need to track application-specific metrics. And application-specific metrics actually enable you this advanced decision-making. They help you to understand, for example, things like cost per feature, something like Dror was showing before, cost per tenant. But and those metrics could be very different. Could be cost per order for retail, cost per fraud detection check for financial services, or cost per stream hour for media and streaming customers. But important to know here and to understand that those metrics would require from you cost allocation. Because if you want to measure unit cost per application, cost per application business drivers, you need to know the cost of that application. And that's why cost allocation is essential here. It's essential from, we're getting back to cost allocation from multiple dimensions, from automation and also from measuring the business impact. And Dror already touched this, but if you running different types of workloads in multiple AWS accounts, that's where you can actually use account level allocation. It's the easiest mode. If you have a choice how to start new workloads, usually multi-account spread, it's like most optimal from FinOps perspective. Yeah, it may have some like a bit more challenges from DevOps like angle, but still from FinOps perspective, multi-account allocation is easy. That's where you allocate your account IDs to your business units, to your teams, to projects, basically to the owners. If you have shared accounts where you have several applications within single account, that's where you need to use tag-based allocations. That's where you need, like, there is no other way to do it. So you need to apply cost allocation tags. And that's where you need to think about things like tagging strategy, tagging policies, monitor tag coverage, and other things. But it's also very powerful because it enables you to implement some advanced scenarios for automation, for optimization. So think about having the correct and right tagging strategy. And if you have shared resources, that's where you share particular resource among multiple tenants. It's the hardest complexity, basically, which you need to solve. But that's where you need to think about, before going into unit economics, that's where you need to think about different types of the allocation, like proportional, even split, or telemetry, or usage-based allocation, to be able to actually then get into unit economics for those metrics. Now, practical steps how to get actually into unit economics. First things I'd like to mention is Cloud Intelligence dashboards from AWS. And it's a collection of dashboards in Amazon Quick Site or Quick Suite now, which every customer can deploy in their accounts with CloudFormation templates as AWS solution. And it's available in AWS Solutions Library. The dashboard is deployed in your accounts, in your organization, so you kind of, the data stays in your S3 bucket, so it's secure. We support multi-pair setup and multi-cloud setup as well with focus data, and it's all open source, and the most important is customizable. So you can get these dashboards deployed and you're not paying for them, so you pay only for use of underlying services like QuickSight, Athena, S3, and it's really cost-efficient solution. And the reason why I'm mentioning Cloud Intelligence dashboards, because if we look into building blocks, how to get into unit economics, there are several services or components which we need to use. First is AWS cost and usage report, right? We need to get our usage data to be able to calculate usage per business driver. And cost and usage report delivers data to S3 bucket, so we use S3. Then you need to query this data. You need to get some business insights from this data. So you can use Amazon Athena, and you need to visualize this data. And again, from our side, we recommend to use Quick Suite or QuickSight component of it. And once you have data in BI tool, right, that's where you can start sharing it with different stakeholders, with financial teams, executives, and others. And the reason why I mentioned Cloud Intelligence dashboards in my talk track is because if you want to get it all up and running very quickly, you can deploy it with our solution with just CloudFormation templates. You don't need to go and like figure out how to deploy it all manually. And now once you have this all, the only step to get to unit economics is add your business metrics here. For example, revenue, amount of customers. So you need to bring this business metrics also to some storage like S3. And once you have it there in Athena, you can easily join it with your cost data and bring it to QuickSight and create your cost per customer, cost per transaction visual, right? So it's not that hard as people sometimes think about. So I really want to encourage everyone to give it a try and get into unit economics, even with metrics which have some like simple entry point like revenue, for example. Also, once you start getting into unit economics, you would see that there are several metrics which your organization can start tracking, and you may have questions: what makes a good unit cost metric? There are a few things to watch here for, and first of all, this metric should correlate with your cloud spend, so it should be actually something like a driver which drives your cloud spend, right? Then you should be able to attribute the cost of this metric. That's what we mentioned. So it should be very clear how much you're paying for something that for workloads which generates that metric, that cost. And then it should make sense for your organization. You should have some strategic alignment whether this metric makes sense to track as organization, whether it's strategic enough. And at the end, I want to leave you with some practical example how to build a unit cost dashboard. And we ran this, actually these slides and this presentation is from reInvent session, which we had in beginning of December 2025. And we also had a workshop there, how to get into unit cost economy with Cloud Intelligence dashboards, which I showed before, and actually start tracking today your cost per customer, cost per transaction, and cost per other business drivers. And you can scan this QR code and it will lead you to workshop where there is a step-by-step guide how to get there. You can just have a look and follow it and get some inspiration. You can also reach out to your AWS account teams if you want to schedule this workshop to be run for you in some demo environment, so we can arrange that as well. But there you have a nice setup scenario with Unicorn Rentals company, which has two different applications, Pigeons Deliveries, Unicorn Rentals. It uses cost allocation tag for one of the applications, and it also has two business metrics, monthly revenue and daily Unicorn deliveries. And in that workshop, we actually show how to track cost per $1,000 of revenue as unified organizational metric and track cost per unicorn for Unicorn Rentals application. So scan this QR code and you can go to this workshop and pretty much see here step-by-step guide how it could be implemented. And we managed to, at reInvent, we managed to walk through this workshop in 1 hour. So everybody just in 1 hour managed to get to unit cost economy. So I really want, if there is one thing that you want to learn from this presentation, I want also you to remember that getting into unit cost economy is not that hard as you may think. All right, I think just in time. That's all from me. Yeah, I'd like to thank you, everyone who joined in today as well.
Thank you, Yuri. Thank you very much.